If you are 50 or older and considering or facing divorce, we're here to help you on your divorce journey. This is the Silver Divorce Podcast, broadcast from the Whitfield Media Group studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Brought to you by our sponsor, Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. The Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Don't trust some 1-800 number. Get real help from her team at MedicareMisty.com. Well, let's podcast. And today I am here with Ellen Holtzman. I am so pleased to have her join me. We're going to talk about a topic many people who have been in long-term marriages have experienced, and that is the question of, should I stay or should I go? And I'm your host, Lisa. Welcome, Ellen.
Oh, thank you very much. It's lovely being here.
Wonderful. And you're in the Boston area, right?
I am.
So,
that's right.
Yeah.
We had a very nice day. It's sunny. It's hard to believe. It's probably in the 60s.
Ah, that's wonderful.
It is wonderful.
Here in Chattanooga, we're a little bit chilly. Not too bad. I'll take it as we head into the holiday season. I can't believe Thanksgiving is just going to be just a few weeks away. So
yeah, it's amazing. It went so fast.
I know. We're full force. So I was happy, though, to get out this morning and have this conversation because it's something that has been on a lot of people's minds
right.
that have been in long-term marriages. And
yep.
I know that you have been a psychologist for more than 30 years, and you help
Correct.
women recover from the end of their marriages. So you have heard a lot of stories.
I have. It's hard to believe how many stories I've heard.
And we're going to talk about your book later, Bouncing Back, How Women Lose and Find Themselves in Marriage and Divorce. I read your book and was really touched by some of the stories that you shared.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So before we jump in, though, I know you treat couples with relationship issues, but you yourself had a compelling personal story that led you down this path.
Right.
Would you share that with our listeners?
Sure. I'd be happy to. Well, this actually took place before I became a psychologist. And so I was in my early 30s, so that was quite a while ago, and a professional woman thinking I was going about my life as best I can. I'd been married almost 8 years, planning to have a family, actually trying to have a family at that time, when my then husband, we went out to dinner one night, and I hadn't yet conceived, and I was sort of wondering about whether I should see a doctor or what I should do. And he sort of said to me over the dinner table, well, I've decided I don't want to have children. I don't know if my mouth fell open or it just felt like it fell open, but I was completely shocked. He had been the one to always want kids way before I did, and I was just I didn't know what to do, really. And he wasn't the kind of guy I could sit down and have one of these heart-to-heart conversations with to understand what was going on. So basically, things went downhill from there. We went to a marriage counselor one time. He refused to come back, and he kind of said to me, well, it's over. The marriage counselor's session we had with the marriage counselor was pretty revealing because I had assumed we were going to be talking about the pros and cons about having children, but all he could talk about were the things about me he didn't like. And I really was completely floored. It wasn't some information I had previously. So I don't know if he had a plan or what he had, but basically he was gone within a month or two. He had then quickly filed for divorce, and I was left reeling, trying to pick up the pieces I was just so unprepared. I was very naive. It wasn't that I was young, but maybe I was young in my head because I didn't have any confidence that I would be able to manage my life on my own, even though I thought I did, but when push came to shove, I didn't really have any confidence. I saw a therapist at the time. That was incredibly important as part of my healing, as well as support from friends and family. And eventually I put my life back together. But at the time that this happened, and I imagine a lot of listeners could identify with this feeling, I was hopeless. I felt like my life was over. I just had no picture of how I was going to be able to start a life over again, maybe have a new relationship. I wanted a child. I mean, all these things that I had aspirations for in my life, I couldn't imagine they would ever happen to me. And so the recovery, I mean, as most people know, was just long, hard experience. I mean, obviously, eventually I made it back, and I think I won't go into the details of what happens later, but that's sort of the basic story that I think I tell in my book, and also I think about in my life.
That's such a shocking pivot. You think you're going down one path and you're going to have children and have a happy family, and then you find out the person you're married to has completely changed their mind about a very important topic.
Yes, and I wasn't really ready to say, well, I'm not going to have kids and I'll stay with you. That was not what I wanted for my life.
Because that's your option. So, you either say, okay, I'll go along with you, or I'm going on my own path.
That's pretty much it, right?
I just can't imagine being put in that position of having to, it's a zero-sum game decision.
Exactly.
You either go along or you don't. So
right, and either way, it was clear to me I was going to lose something that was really important to me.
Right, absolutely. You're still going to lose your husband, or you're going to lose having children.
Right.
That's a challenge.
Right.
And so that's what your time that you spent recovering, and did you see a therapist during that time yourself?
I did.
You did?
I did.
Okay.
And in fact, I saw one weekly for quite a while. And then through the years, I would go back to this person. It was a really important relationship for me. It was the chemistry was right. And I know some people don't have great chemistry with a therapist right off the bat, but I was lucky in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like he helped me grow up. He educated me about what I was going through. So, I was very grateful for that experience, tremendously grateful. I'm sure in part it motivated, the success I had, I think, motivated me to become a therapist myself. Maybe if I think back on it, that was part of it, probably.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And if you would, for me, I've always wondered, what is the difference between life coach and psychotherapist?
Okay, life coach has some kind of training, although I'm not familiar with what the training is. Psychotherapy has different kind of training. You could see a counselor who probably has a master's degree. You could see someone like myself who has a doctoral degree. I think one difference is that psychologists and psychotherapists can diagnose people with a particular psychiatric disorder. Okay. And they have a lot of practical training, and they also know the theory. So I went to school for 4 years in preparation for my career, and part of it was practical work. Every year I had an internship where I was treating patients. But a lot of the other stuff I was doing was learning the theory about human development, human psychology, abnormal psychology, marital and family therapy, all the things that I would need to do to be able to take care of people. And so it's a sort of comprehensive background, which I found I loved it, first of all, and I also found it very helpful in my career to have that background, to have some theory to draw on when I'm taking care of people. That was really important for me as well.
So would you say it's more understanding why people do the things that they do, or why they behave the way they behave, diagnosing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Part of it is that, it is, but I think everybody's always seeking self-understanding. Mm-hmm. And so, that's part of it. But that's not all of it. People come in part with a desire to understand themselves, but maybe even a greater desire to feel better. Yeah. And sometimes that requires that people do things differently than they've been doing it up till now. And so there's lots of discussion about behavior change and how you could, reconceptualize your life. That happens in psychotherapy, probably in the same way that happens in life coaching, although I've never actually done that myself.
Okay. Well, thanks. That does help clarify for me. I see a lot of different terms in this industry and dealing with divorce, and so I thought it would be good to kind of get a distinction in my mind. Well, let's then go on and talk about the decision that many people find themselves in after long-term marriages. They're not happy, but yet they may not want to stay. I can tell you a number of people that have said I don't want to go because maybe I don't want to lose everything I've worked for, or I keep hoping it will get better. I understand that there is a process called discernment counseling. Would you share a little bit about exactly what that is, discernment counseling?
Sure. I want to preface it by saying I'm sort of a traditional marriage counselor. So I know this by theory, less by practice. But when I read about it, it certainly made a lot of sense to me. So let me contrast it with what somebody could expect if they see a marriage counselor. So usually if you go to a marriage counselor's office, two people have made some kind of commitment to make the marriage better. It doesn't mean that you haven't considered divorce or that, you're absolutely sure that this marriage has a future, but there has to be a good faith effort to work on the marriage. And that if it's not there, there's really, or if one person doesn't have it, there's really no way that a marriage counselor could make any progress. And so, I work with people over time to help them make the marriage better. I think it doesn't always work. And, sometimes I'll get to the end of a number of sessions where it gets clear to me that the people are frustrated, I'm frustrated, nobody's made the kind of progress that they want. And I'm always sort of reluctant to bring up the issue of divorce because I feel like they've come to me to support the marriage. And they really don't want me. I mean, I never say to people, I think this marriage isn't going to work. But I'm just sort of reluctant to even bring up the idea of divorce entirely. Although sometimes I have to. And sometimes I'll say, it looks like you haven't made the kind of progress. We'll sort of delve into that discussion. And I might say, if you want help separating, I'd be happy to offer it to you. And some people take me up on it. I would say most people don't. So discernment counseling, as I understand it, starts with the premise that divorce and a discussion about divorce is on the table. So these might be people that worked on their marriage by themselves for a number of years, as most people do, or it may be people that have sought help from a marriage counselor unsuccessfully for however long they have done that. And they're really at the stage where they need to make a decision. And so it could be that people sort of impulsively, after so many years of agonizing, make a decision and go for it. They get a lawyer, they are in court, they're divorced. I think the discernment counseling does is it sort of slows the process down and says to both people, you will benefit to get more clarity about your decision. So what I thought was interesting about that, I had looked into the background a little bit, is that the person who is important in discernment counseling, his name is William Darity, and the way he got into it, he discovered, working with a judge, that even at the very end, even as people are getting their lawyer, about to go to court, there's still some question in their mind about whether or not this marriage could work. And he found that more people believe that it could work, I think, than he expected. So that the statistics he gave is that 1 in 4 parents at the verge of divorce still want the marriage to be saved. 11% of the people would believe that their marriage could be saved. And so I think what he was thinking at the time is that there's really a hope that should be mined at the very end, at the very step before you sitting in front of the judge getting divorced. And what I thought was so interesting about that is that, I thought back to my experience as a marriage counselor or even as an individual therapist. And people will fantasize about divorce. They'll think about divorce. They'll plan for a divorce. They might separate and then come back together. But there's something about their experience at the very end when they can see what the actual cold reality of their lives are going to be like divorce that gives them pause and they have second thoughts. And I think what discernment counseling really tries to take advantage of is that moment when you really want to think about, once again, even though you may have thought about it, thousands of times, however long you've taken to think about it, just give yourself one more opportunity to work through it and see if this is the decision that you really want.
That's almost
that's kind of my broad understanding. Is that sort of how you make sense of this too?
Yeah, it really was. And I had a couple of thoughts. One being, some people still have that, hope springs in eternal. Hope springs eternal. And they think, gosh, am I really doing the right thing when it comes down to facing a court? They could step back and try again, perhaps for discernment counseling. Or the other thought I had was, what about those people who say, I was blindsided, they didn't know it was coming? Maybe if somebody's thinking of divorce, but they're not ready to speak to an attorney, would they benefit from discernment counseling?
I mean, as an individual or as part of a couple?
As an individual.
As an individual. Yeah, I think, when I thought about it, I thought discernment counseling with an individual is not that different from what I just do in individual therapy. It's really to help people understand their situation and make a decision. And so everybody needs that, I think, at this moment. It's beneficial to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. So whether you're coming in as a couple or whether you're coming in as an individual, I think there's a benefit both ways. What I thought was particularly interesting about discernment counseling is that this fellow, William Dougherty, kind of divided the couple into two roles. There's the leaning out person who's more clearly committed to getting a divorce. And then there's the leaning in person who wants this marriage to be sustained. And from his point of view, both people can benefit from discernment counseling. So the person that's more wanting the divorce can really still get clear in their mind what's going on and why they're wanting it. So he sort of poses different questions to people, and the questions could be, so what is it about this marriage that you think is making it fail? And what have you tried that hasn't worked? And I think the third question is really the most important one, which is, what is your contribution to this difficult marriage? Because I will tell you how people will spend hours blaming each other. They'll do that when I see them individually. They'll blame their spouse. When I see them as a couple, they'll blame each other. And whether it's marriage counseling or discernment counseling, people have to decide what they've done and what they're going to work on to make things better, because they can't change their spouse. So I thought that was a real benefit of discernment counseling that I hadn't really been aware of. That because I'm thinking, is it okay to give a case example? Does that make sense?
No, I'd love that. No.
Okay. So I have a couple I've seen for quite a while. I would say they've been up and down for years. And at the last session, the husband said he really doesn't believe that this marriage has any future. When he looks back on that, all he could see is years of fighting. The wife really doesn't see it that way. She feels like she really wants this marriage to continue, even though her husband doesn't believe she loves him. She does love him. Maybe she hasn't communicated that adequately to him. But what was so interesting about this guy is that he said, as we're discussing what he's imagining is going to happen next, he's imagining a terrible life for himself. He thinks, well, he'll have to move into his parents' house because he can't afford to live on his own. How will he see his kids? Because he's devoted to them, but he's going to be living an hour away. And then I thought this was so revealing. When he imagined having another relationship in the future, he said, oh, it'll just be like this one. I'm not going to be able to do anything better in the future. And I thought, this guy is so confused. On the one hand, he's saying the marriage is over. On the other hand, he cannot articulate why the marriage is over, what he did, and how he's going to have a better future. And he seemed to me to be the perfect person for discernment counseling, either as part of a couple or individual therapy to clarify his own mind, which is what I suggested that he do. I'll see them as a couple, sporadically, but he really needs to understand why he is thinking the way he is, which is sort of baffling to me. And I think it's as baffling to him and it's baffling to her. He just does not really understand what's going on.
Yeah, that is baffling because I want a divorce, but I think my life is going to be worse once I am divorced. That is not making sense to me either. So,
no, it isn't. But to him, I guess it makes sense.
I guess it did in his mind.
I think it makes sense because he can't put into words what's
why he's
going
unhappy.
on. And I really think if you can't articulate what is happening to you, there's no way you can understand it. It's probably a feeling, maybe frustration, maybe hopelessness, maybe fear. But until you really put it into words, you're really sort of lost about how you're going to make sense of who you are.
Well, and it could be his perception that isn't even based in any sort of reality. He's created this in his mind, this storyline that he thinks that he needs to carry out to its conclusion.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. It is his story.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's based in fact, really, it's beside the point. And he just needs a lot of help in trying to, clarify. And I can't really do it with him and his wife together. He needs like more individual attention, I think, than I could do as a couples counselor for the two of them.
That's what I was thinking about discernment counseling, how helpful it could be for that person that, they're stewing it over, they're thinking about it, they're not ready even to talk about it or broach the topic, but help them figure out where they are. And then the other thing I was thinking too is that after divorce, when you're going through the healing process, one of the biggest challenges is they will ask you, what role did you play in this marriage failing? And you really have to honestly answer that to start the healing process. Well, it sounds as though you're saying in discernment counseling, you would ask that before you initiated divorce. So, figuring that out before you get to that point, wow, what a benefit it would be.
It is, yeah. Because, I thought about my own experience. So I was, so Darity divides it into the leaning out person and the leaning in. So obviously my then husband was leaning out. He was falling out of the marriage. But I tried to imagine, so if the two of us had discernment counseling and I was the leaning in partner, what would be kind of the line of questioning that would help me in my own progress? And I thought, I think someone would have to say to me, listen to your husband and don't get panic-stricken about what he's saying, because I think what the conversation would have gone, he would have expressed maybe unhappiness with me, maybe thoughts about leaving. And I think at the time, the person that I was at the time, there was no way I could have listened to that with an open mind that I would have had to listen to make the marriage better. I was always lobbying and convincing him to stay married, all the benefits that we would have together. But I don't think, and if I'm honest with myself, which I'm trying to be at this moment, I don't think I could have sat there and listened to him say what made him unhappy and do it undefensively.
Right.
I just didn't have the skills back then. So I think that, that would have been beneficial for me to have gone through. I didn't do it. I mean, this was a long time ago. There was probably no discernment counseling.
Probably not, no.
Yeah, that would have helped me, I think.
Yeah, I could see where it would help a lot of couples, because discernment, would it be you go through the discernment counseling, and if you make the decision, okay, we are staying together, then it becomes marriage counseling. Is that the way you see it?
Well, the different kind of routes people can take. They can just say, we're going to keep things the way they are, which is keeping the status quo. That may not mean going to marriage counseling, just they accommodate each other and they decide they're going to. It doesn't mean that marriage counseling and or divorce are off the table. It's just for the time being, we're going to keep it the way it is. So that's sort of one possibility.
That's like
there's a possibility. Sorry?
No, just they make that one major decision first. We're going to stay together.
That's right.
Or we're not going to stay together. Yeah.
Right. Then there's the route of we're going to really commit to marriage counseling, and we're going to give it 6 months, and we are not going to talk about separating during that time. That's another route that people could do. And those are people that I guess are feeling a little bit, have gotten out of discernment counseling enough of a boost that they feel like it's worth giving it another shot.
Yeah, just that decision.
And then there's the people, sorry?
Yeah, just that decision of we're going to give it 6 months and we're not going to talk. That would take a huge pressure off the
Wouldn't
couple.
It?
Yeah.
Really? Then there are the people who decide that divorce is really the only option. And I think there's even a benefit for these people, which is that if you clarify what you're thinking before you get divorced, you have a greater possibility of having a civil divorce.
Oh, yes.
I've seen, and you must have heard these stories too, horrendous divorces where people do terrible things to each other, say terrible things, put their children in the middle. I mean, it's, the emotions are running high. It does not bring out the best in people, and they can act badly. And so, the fact that you sort of process things before you're actually going through the divorce, I think could really help people be civilized to one another in a very difficult situation, which would be wonderful. Really, it's a great outcome, even if it's not the desired outcome.
Tired of living with pain? Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Surgery offers cutting-edge tools and advanced technologies to get you back to the life you love, faster. With us, you can recover at home after surgery in hours, not days. Our highly experienced team of physicians deliver the exceptional and personalized care you deserve. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Surgery. We're the center for pain today, gone tomorrow. Learn more at sportmed.com.
I was thinking that exactly, that it might lead to a more civil divorce because you've hashed out a lot of the issues and released a lot of anger toward each other in the whole process. And then also, the other thing I was thinking is that it might help you in your future relationships. If you do decide, if you decide divorce is it and you go on and you become involved in another relationship, you've taken time to understand yourself better and understand your thought processes better, and you might be, a more optimal partner for the next person.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what you said just a few minutes ago, which is you do the work before you get divorced. And
right.
If you don't do it before you do it, then you do it after you get divorced.
Yeah.
One way or the other, those are these questions you have to address if you're going to have a better future. There's
right.
no way around that one.
Yeah, one way or another, you have to do the work, or you're going to keep getting involved with the same type of person and having the same outcome over and over again.
Or you're going to be the same partner.
Yeah.
And probably people don't want to be the same partner in a second relationship or a second marriage than they were initially, because they could see that they've grown and changed, and they want to bring that new person into the new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty important.
I think so. It's very important. So I'm very interested in that whole concept of helping so many people, discernment counseling. So if I have listened to this and I think I might benefit from that, how do you find somebody that does the discernment counseling? Is there...
Okay, that's an interesting question, because I wasn't really sure about how to do that myself. There is specialized training, I discovered, that there's a whole course that people could do with William Dougherty and the people that he works with. But in the end, you know what I did? I just Googled it. I Googled discernment counseling, and I found who in my area does it.
Okay.
And I just want to say one more thing about that. People usually find me through Psychology Today. I don't know if your listeners know that there's a directory. There's a therapist directory. It's organized by state, by city, by zip code. And it's a very simple way to find providers in your area. When I went through it, I couldn't find anybody that did discernment counseling per se, but, I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking at all these therapists and what their specialties are. But there is probably a way to find that out through the Psychology Today website. It's a really great resource for people that are looking for help.
Good. Well, we'll have to see if we can't link that in the show notes. I can put a link to that Psychology Today so people can go and do a little bit of research if they're interested. I just think so many people would benefit from discernment counseling. So often the decision to divorce there's a long lead into it when you're in a long-term marriage.
Is.
People are thinking about it for a year or more. So you hear,
years.
2 years, yeah. So
that's really my experience, that people agonize over this decision. And you can understand why. It's transformative, it's shattering, you have children, there are all kinds of ways. Even though, like in the book that I wrote about, there's a woman who has older children, has adult children, and she doesn't even want to disappoint them by separating from the husband. So it's just a very important decision. And so I guess it makes sense that there's a lot of agony. Mm-hmm. It's easy to get married. It's really hard to get divorced.
That's right. Yeah.
For a variety of reasons.
Yeah, that's very true.
Emotionally, financially, all the ways you could think of, it's difficult to end a marriage.
Yeah, and you mentioned people with adult children struggling, and we did an episode with Kimberly Mathis on how to talk to adult children. So people who are going through this, I'll link that in the show notes, can really get some benefit from that, because it does hold people back.
It does.
They will stay in the marriage simply because of the adult children being hurt by it, or changing the family dynamics. So that's another reason, as you mentioned, people take a long time to make that decision.
Well, you're never not a mother, even if your kids are old.
That's right. That is right.
You can't bear to hurt their feelings.
No. And they look to you as an example, too, sometimes.
So that's an interesting point, because getting divorced can be an example, a positive example as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't think of it in that way when you're going through it, but particularly maybe for daughters, maybe sons as well, to see a woman, I think, be able to take care of herself and take charge of her life is good for them.
I would agree.
Even if it's painful.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, let's shift gears for a minute then. I do want to talk about your book. And
Sure.
As I mentioned, it's Bouncing Back, How Women Lose and Find Themselves in Marriage and Divorce. And I have to tell you, I was at the point of tears reading Lisa's story, and how many times that she gave her husband another opportunity to come back. So why don't you share with us a little bit about the genesis of the book, and let our listeners have a flavor for some of the stories.
Okay, sure. So when I went through a divorce, I spent a lot of time reading books. I read books about all kinds of trauma. I mean, I certainly read books about people that went through divorce. I read about people that had terrible physical accidents, anything I could get my hands on where I was reading about somebody who was in a traumatic situation and recovering. I just simply devoured. And so I thought about that when I was trying to decide, what I wanted to write about. I thought, look, I know the feelings of going through divorce because I've personally gone through it. I also know the feelings of many women, and men too, although I don't write about them, who have gone through it as well. I could write something that would be very vivid and I hope would help people identify with the characters, because I really wanted to write something that people would resonate with. That was one thing. But the other thing I wanted is that I wanted people to feel hopeful, because I just remember thinking back at the time when I had no hope. I couldn't imagine how I ever would get hope. And it was a therapist that I saw that kind of held out a picture of a better future for me. And so I think I was trying to do that in the book that I wrote. So I wanted something that people could identify with, and also people could feel like it would help them through a very difficult situation. So I talked already a little bit about, my character, so to speak, and who I am in this book. And it starts with the end of my marriage. It goes through changing careers, becoming a psychotherapist, what a difficult decision that was. And it sort of traces the whole arc of my life till I get to the point where I'm really starting out on a new life, which is a really positive thing that I was able to write about. There are two other patients of mine that I wrote about. One is Lisa, Lisa, our podcast Lisa just mentioned. She's a woman who is 50 at the time that I meet her. She had married her high school boyfriend. He had always promised to take care of her. She was perfectly content to be a wife and a mother. She had sort of a small job that she did, but it was not the focus of her life. She was enjoying her life. She thought they had a good marriage. And then she discovered her husband had an affair. And, some people do recover from affairs, but this was like the tip of the iceberg, the affair, because she discovered over time that he had the affair. He made all kinds of promises about how he wouldn't go back to the woman. Lisa was the only woman for him. They would have a future, blah, blah. I don't even want to go into details. It was so awful. But he kept drawing her back in. So she would kick him out. He would stay out of the house for a while. He would make promises, and she would let him back in. And by the time I saw her, she must have gone on this merry-go-round maybe 4 or 5 times. And she looked terrible. I mean, she just looked like somebody who was distraught. And so the discussion for her, and it seemed to me, pretty clear-cut what she should do, but it was not clear-cut for her. She agonized over what she should do about the marriage, because she had come from divorced parents. She had said to herself she would never, ever get divorced. And that she had these 3 grown children, and she had made a promise to herself that she would never hurt them as well. But it was an untenable situation. She was completely caught between, living in a situation with a man that was clearly never going to be faithful to her, and then breaking everybody's heart, including her own, over a future that she never wanted to have. So the story really is about what she does as she's making this decision and what comes next in her life. Mm-hmm. So she was, that's a second character, so to speak. And Megan is a third one. She's a woman who's quite a bit younger. And she's somebody I really admired. I mean, she was so different from me. I was distraught, shy, timid, unassertive. Megan is this go-getter. She knows exactly what she wants in her life. She went to college. She decided she would be a teacher. She got her teaching job. She wanted to marry that college boyfriend. She wanted to buy a house. All these things in her mind were this checklist she was working through. And she got them all until she got to the end, which was, after you have the first child, well, then you got to have the second child. And the husband said, well, I'm really not sure that's what I want to do. And that just caught her up short. She was, dumbfounded maybe in the same way that I was. Because, part of it, she wanted this child. It wasn't like something just a lark. But it was also, it didn't fit the picture she had for her life. She had created this whole idea about how her life was going to go. And in the very end, it looked like it wasn't going to work out the way she thought. And so what was interesting about this event is that it began her on a path that she didn't really know she was going to go down. She began to really rethink the marriage because she wondered why her husband would want to not have a second kid. She was the one that was doing most of the work, the domestic work in the family, even though they were both full-time professionals. And it just began her questioning things that she never questioned before. And eventually, it led her to the point where she realized that this marriage really was not what she hoped it would be. And she had another difficult decision because unlike Lisa, who had grown children, Megan had a toddler at this point. And the thought of, having her husband not live at the house was very difficult for her, but she had to make a decision. But it was another case of agonizing over the decision that, finally she was able to make.
Yeah, when I read Megan's story, I thought it would take a lot of bravery to decide to divorce someone when you have a toddler, and know that you're going to take this all on your own in hopes that you can find another relationship where you can continue your story. Because Megan had written the story for her life, and this particular aspect, wasn't in any of the chapters. So,
That's excellent. And I know you're a reader too.
I know, and I thought, I don't know if I could have done that. I don't know if I could have just said, okay, we'll see you later, and off I go. So
that's an interesting word that you used, brave, because that's the word that I thought. And I knew that everybody who read this story was not going to see her that way. Yeah. I could imagine some people would say, why is she so selfish? Why doesn't she just think about her child and sacrifice for that child? Because a lot of women would do that. They would just think they have to raise this kid, and so they have to do that with the child's father. But I thought brave is really the right word. Mm-hmm. Because I would think to myself, this woman's in her 30s. So let's say she lives another 40 years. Is she going to live unhappily for that amount of time? Is that an outcome I would want for her? Mm-mm. No, there was no way that I would want that for her. So as much as I could see the pain she was in about divorcing with a young child, I also felt that she wanted another chance for herself. And, I think what's sort of interesting about this decision, and you brought it up a couple seconds ago, which is it could be a decision to have another partner, but it could be a decision to say, well, if I have to live my life on my own, I'll be able to do that. And I think that's the point that she finally reached, because there's no guarantee about what's going to happen next. Right. And she was well aware of that, being kind of a planner and somebody who likes to be in control. She knew she was going down uncharted territory, and that she was going to have to be able to accept that in order to move on to the next stage of her life.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think a lot of readers will find people they know in those stories, or even themselves in those stories. So I recommend your book. and I got mine off Amazon. So I'm sure that anybody can go out, just search for Ellen Holtzman, Bouncing Back, and you'll see it pop up, and it's worth the read. So thank you very much, Ellen.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoy that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
And
it warms my heart.
Oh, good. Well, I wanted to ask you one question that all the years that you've been in practice, is there one particular story that really touched you, a couple story that maybe made you cry, or that you spent a lot of time really agonizing over what was going on with them?
Well, I think Lisa in the book was one of those people, because I just felt like I identified her. I looked at her face and I thought, oh my God, that's what my face must have looked like. And I identified with her so closely. And I wanted her to have a good life. And I didn't cry, but I felt heartbroken for her often. And there's a point that I talk about in the book where she decides she's not coming back to therapy. And she's going to try it again with her husband, the fifth, sixth, whatever time she was up to. And I remember going through this and thinking, what have I done wrong? How is it that she's making a decision that I think is such a poor, and I couldn't say that. I mean, I had to be on her side, whatever her side was going to be. But I thought, how could I have gotten this so wrong that she would leave therapy after 6 or 8 weeks and just go back to him?
Yeah, it was.
And that was a very difficult moment as a therapist. So I just want to say one more. That's a good. Yeah. I don't know if do you have time for one more thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So what I think Lisa's story brings up something I also tried in the book, is that I wanted to give the readers a picture of what's it like to be a therapist, not from the outside, but looking inside my brain and see, what does this therapist really think about when she's treating patients? Because I know people have images of therapists. I don't know if it's like from Tony Soprano or whatever movie they see, where they see the therapist, the all-knowing therapist sitting there, shaking their head, saying, looking like a professional who knows what she's doing. And I wanted to give a different picture of therapy. And my interaction with Lisa, I think, did that, because I got to show people that I'm trying hard not to let my biases affect the treatment. I'm expressing self-doubt. I don't know everything. Sometimes I think I haven't said the right thing. And I really wanted to demystify therapy for readers, because I think you had mentioned when we spoke earlier that people can be reluctant to go to therapy, and they could be intimidated by it or apprehensive about it. And I really wanted to give people a sense that this is a human interaction between, a provider who has feelings for you, wants the best for you, is not going to judge you, is not going to criticize you, really wants to help you get to a good place in your life. And so I thought, if I show people what it's really like to be a therapist, maybe that would be beneficial for them, as well as this whole divorce, space, but the whole idea that you can go to a therapist. It's not going to be a bad experience. You can change therapists if you don't have the right chemistry, but there's somebody there that's going to be helpful for you, because I think people should know that in general.
Yeah, I will say, when I was reading that story and she was going to stop therapy, I was screaming, leave him, leave him. No, don't do it. But reading the story from your perspective, that was the first time I really understood that as a therapist, you're not going to tell them what they should do. You're not going to write a script for them that, like a drug prescription.
Right. Right.
You're just helping them understand themselves and their decision making, but not tell them how to make the decision.
That's right, because I think they have to live their lives, and they have to be able to live with whatever decision they make. It shouldn't be mine or their mother's or their best friends. It has to be, this is a real grow-up experience. You have to be able to take responsibility for your decision, feel like you gave it the best shot you could, you thought it through as best you could. It wasn't an impulsive decision, and nobody knows the future. So you're just bubbling along just like everybody else here.
Yeah,
doing the best you can.
You're not going to walk out and go, well, my therapist said I have to leave, so I'm going to go tell my husband my therapist told me I had to do this. So
that would make it easy.
That would make it easy, and that might be a cop out some people might want to use.
I'm sure, yeah, but they don't get it from me.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think that part of the book really helped me to understand therapy. So, no, thank you for that.
That's good. That's really what I wanted. I didn't want people to be scared of it or to feel like they're going to be judged or, whatever apprehensions people have. I really wanted people to know that this is just two human beings sitting down, and one human being really wants to help the other one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's kind of perfect. My view. That's perfect. Well, is there anything else that I haven't asked you about today that you'd like to share?
No, I think I've covered it. I'm just glad I wrote the book, and I'm glad people like it.
Yeah, so am I. And I thank you for joining me today on the Silver
thank you for having
podcast.
me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And before we go, I'd like to have you share with our listeners how they can reach you, your social media, website, and I can also link that in the show notes.
Okay, it's ellenholtzman.com is the website. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm newly on Instagram. I'm not technologically savvy, so I'm just trying to figure that one out.
I feel you there. Yeah.
What I do is I put all the podcasts and Medium on. I mean, I've written a bunch of stuff and had lots of interviews, so I put all that on the social media sites that I'm on so people could get more information as well as information about the book.
Great.
And so you said, you can buy the book at Amazon. You could buy it at bookshop.org. There's the Kindle version, the paperback version. I'm thinking maybe I should record an audio version, but I haven't got there yet either.
Yeah, I'm a huge Audible listener, and this podcast.
I know so many people are. That's why I think I'm missing that. So I've thought, well, maybe I could record it myself. Why not?
You should, and people can hear your voice, and it would be a wonderful thing. So,
thank you.
And this podcast is actually on Audible as well. Audible has podcasts. So, yeah. Well, I thank you so much. And
thank you.
For our listeners, please join us on our next episode and make sure you subscribe to the Silver Divorce podcast. And I do welcome your feedback. I want to hear from you. What topics are you interested in? What tugs at your heart that you'd like to know about? Or what guests would you like me to have on the show? You can join our Facebook and Instagram pages at Silver Divorce Podcast. And also, please leave us a rating and a review. Those are very important to grow in the algorithm and also to attract great guests like Ellen. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, our title sponsor, Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty, for making this possible. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. And Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Don't trust some 1-800 number. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. Whether you are considering divorce or you are newly in this divorce process, we'll help you navigate and we'll tell you things your attorney might not tell you. Until next time, remember, divorce is one event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa, and I'll see you next time.